Fam, let's talk about Netanyahu, your favorite person. BB's out there, right?
God.
I mean, we saw a crazy week, or it was close to 2 weeks of just endless bombing,
endless
loss
bombing.
of lives.
Yeah,
and
91,000 people displaced.
Yes.
Right? Over 230 people dead, 65 of them children.
Oh, yep.
Most people, the average median age, by the way, in my research, I can't remember where it was, but is 17 and a half years old of Palestine. Yeah. That's the average median age of the country. Just so you guys know, when you're killing Palestinians, you're killing kids.
Yeah.
So this is according to Reuters. Israel and Hamas claim victory as ceasefire holds. So the ceasefire is holding. They agreed on a ceasefire yesterday, or basically today. For us today, for them yesterday. After their forces ended 11 days of fighting. But of course, 91,000 people are displaced, so it's going to take forever to rebuild. Guess what they're going to rebuild though? They're not going to rebuild Palestine. They're going to rebuild Israel. They're going to continue, because this ceasefire doesn't mean that Palestinians aren't living in apartheid. The ceasefire doesn't mean that Palestinians have access to water. The ceasefire doesn't mean that Palestinians have access to regular food or deliveries or help from other people. By the way, I have to reiterate this because there's a lot of people supposedly raising money for Palestinian children, right? Guys, directly from people who have been in Palestine, directly from Palestinians, you cannot, it is next to impossible to send funds to Palestinians. If you're sending it to a charity, chances are that's not getting to these kids. It's not. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but giving money to YouTubers living in Beverly Hills, I don't know what to tell you. Even if they give it all to this charity, the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, which is, by the way, made up of a vast number of NGOs, including the WHO, the World Health Organization, is not going to get to these people. Yeah. That is straight from the mouth of people who have lived in the region and people from the region.
Well, that's been a common thing
so
too,
you know.
fam. Yeah. I think George Carlin said that taking away United States foreign aid is like taking away money from poor people in a first world country and giving it to rich people in a third world country. You know what I'm saying? All that money gets funneled into all these Fugazi groups too as well, and never hits where it's coming from. I like the fact that it says, can I read this one line? It says, as Palestinians and Israelis began to assess the scale of damage, one Gazan said his neighborhood looked like it had been hit by a tsunami, and not Johnny. How can the world call itself civilized? As he was standing next to a rubble of a 14-story tower that had been just knocked the hell down, and Johnny's showing a lot of those pictures right now.
The cost is
disgusting. Look at that.
Palestinian officials put the cost for reconstruction at tens of millions of dollars. Do you think Israel is going to spend tens of millions of dollars to reconstruct Palestinians?
Yeah, no way.
No, they're not. They in fact take away supplies for them to reconstruct their houses.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, if you don't do this, then we're going to take away your house. I mean, this is a reality. Yeah. And again, I put that interview with Eva Bartlett. She's lived there in the region. You guys should listen to that interview. She's a wealth of knowledge. And I have one from Marwa, who is a Beirut-based journalist. And she considers herself Palestinian as well. And she just said so much on the situation. And you need to hear from her perspective why condemning Hamas isn't, it's just ridiculous, right? Yeah. And it's just bad. All of this has happened. It doesn't end all of this, right? Because is Israel going to be held accountable for all the people they killed?
No.
I mean, come on.
Fam, Israel has the right to protect themselves when bottle rockets are shot at them. I shouldn't say that, too, because there are 10 people who died in Israel and whatnot. But, I mean, it is very, I mean, you're talking about, once again, we're talking about the newest weapons, precision-guided weapons that they do the knocking. They give you 30 seconds to get out of the place, and then all of a sudden here comes a missile out of nowhere taking down the whole building. We've seen this live. We've seen this happen on a regular basis. It's very lopsided. You know what I'm saying?
One more thing I wanted to say is that in my interview with Marwa yesterday, she basically said that the Palestinians are demanding certain things. And if those things aren't met, that doesn't mean that this ends right there. But what is happening in Palestine is something that people need to know. That the factions were divided. There were different parties, and they were all divided. They all had, like here, right? The left is so divided, right? She said she wishes that here in America, people could come together and stand up against their government, just like what against, their government, meaning over there in Palestine. All of these Palestinian factions and parties came together and stood to stand up against Israel. And that's why they were able to resist. They were able to come together and use their intelligence and use whatever weapons they were able to get from Lebanon and Syria, whatever rockets they were able to get. And mainly they were able to fight and resist on their own because they were offered help. And they said, we should be able to be good for now on our own. The Palestinian people are a very proud people. They're very, they're not just going to sit there and take it. And so that's what happened. So in a way, they do consider a victory because Israel had to back off. But why did Israel have to back off, right? We're going to talk about that. So here's Vanessa Beeley. I just want to read her tweet real quick. After days of Israeli aggression, war crimes, and infanticide, meaning the murder of babies, because that's literally what happened, the Gaza resistance came out at dawn today to show defiantly that victory is theirs. This is 15 hours ago. Zionists can lick their many wounds. They are exposed as terrorists. Yeah, the world has seen that. Palestinian resistance is revived. Israel security is dead. Israeli security is dead. Or here it is. Right here, you can see that picture. All of these people coming out in solidarity and support. But it doesn't end there, right? This is what sources in Netanyahu's own political party told Ma'ariv newspaper, that Bibi is dragging out the fighting in Gaza to prevent his opponent from forming a government.
Yeah, well, this is something we talked about. I looked into the whole situation. Like, Netanyahu did not have enough support to form his own government.
Exactly.
So I would say the speaker of their house went to the opponent with the second most votes and said, you can try to go and form a government right now. And that person's trying to form a government. If that person can get enough allies within the Congress over in Israel, they can form their own government, taking Netanyahu out of power. Because there is a kind of like feeling that a lot of people are just, even within the government in Israel, are just done with Netanyahu.
Yeah.
They don't want him to be the leader anymore. The people don't want him to be the leader anymore. He's using the government to protect him from his own criminal charges, because he's like, criminal charges against him. So that is what's going on. He's trying to, and a lot of people say this too, that when something like this happens in Israel, Netanyahu's playbook is to try to attack somebody, do something to get this form of nationalism to kind of build behind him. Like, oh, look, he's protecting Jewish people from what's going on in Syria. We just bombed something. We just bombed a plant over there. We got Hezbollah. We got Hamas over here. So they say, look for these things to happen, because Netanyahu is a master of doing this when he comes under political power back at home and whatnot. So
right. And I just want to read this part right here. He doesn't seem to have a real desire to eradicate Hamas. Relations between the Arabs in Israel and Jews are being left in ruins. This advisor said Netanyahu is galloping towards a fifth election and taking the country hostage.
Yep.
The collapse of right-wing chairman Naftali Bennett gives him a boost, but support for him within the Likud is weakening.
That's his party. Yeah.
This is, and that's the thing. That's what we were talking about too in one of our chats with the fams, is that doesn't mean anything. You get rid of Netanyahu, we've seen this. We've talked about this before. Yeah. There are others like him or worse ready to take power.
Yeah.
They're going to paint it as if this is some victory. We got rid of Netanyahu. If that happens, right? The next guy's going to be just as bad, because this isn't about who is in power as far as the presidency or as far as the leadership. This is about the systemic power, the military industrial complex. Israel is basically our gigantic military base in West Asia, and that's what they are. That's what they've been for a long time. That's why Biden wanted to create. He said, if we didn't have Israel, we'd have to create another.
We have to find another place for our base.
Exactly. That's basically it, guys. And it's crazy. So look out for that happening. And I also have to mention the Syrian elections are coming up as well. So this is what Steve put up, right? This is from the Electronic Intifada. Like I said, always read their articles related to West Asia. The UN said that some 91,000 people in Gaza were internally displaced as a result of Israel's bombing. Around 66,000 sought refuge at dozens of UN-flagged schools across Gaza, where at least one baby was born, while the remainder stayed with host families. So we're not even thinking about the people who are displaced, who are alive, but they're displaced. In the absence of international accountability, a repeat of the last 11 days of Israeli terror in Gaza is all but guaranteed. Yeah, this is going to happen. Guess what? if you are a criminal, there's no accountability to you. You're going to keep doing it because you haven't gotten caught. Accountability must rise to the top of the agenda of the United Nations, a group of human rights experts stated earlier this week. That message appears to have been ignored by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who called for a return to the failed approach of a negotiated two-state solution while urging for a ceasefire on Thursday. Palestinian groups and unions, political movements and unions worldwide have called on the UN to investigate Israel's regime of apartheid over the Palestinian people as a whole, because that's still happening. Human rights groups have called on the Intel Crime Court to probe Israel's targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza, including towers housing media offices. Again, Netanyahu just completely okayed the whole thing, right?
What did Steve write?
Steve said 91,000 human beings in an open-air prison are homeless. They do not have freedom of movement. They do not. There's no bomb shelters. Let me add, there's no bomb shelters in Palestine. They do not have clean water. They also have next to no way to receive direct aid. Israel will not be held accountable unless the West stops being afraid of optics and ends this apartheid.
Yeah. They don't have bomb shelters too as well, because that was something that happened years ago, is that they targeted people who were building like underground tunnels to try to protect themselves, saying that these were underground tunnels that went into Israel to smuggle weapons through Egypt at one point. And therefore they went, and that's why they did those cluster bombs, fam, because they wanted to go into the ground, you know, and blowing everything up in the ground. Even though if the people were just building like bomb shelters underneath their house to try to, you know, protect themselves from these bombs, they still looked at them as like, no, they're building tunnels to transport weapons. And that's why they use these certain bunker busters, they're called. They go into the ground, create grit, and they kill everything underneath. So there are no bomb shelters. There's nowhere to hide. And it's so densely populated. It's like 2 million people in this one area. And it's just an open-air prison. There's a blockade. You see near the water, you think, oh, maybe they can get in the water and get out of there. No, the Israeli Navy's out there waiting for them in case they try to go out there. They'll shoot them down out there as well.
One other thing I wanted to point out in the interview with Marwa that you guys will be seeing is that she talked about how Israel also attacked Lebanon. And I believe it was 2006. They attacked Lebanon. And they also used the excuse that they were building military warehouses underneath schools and underneath houses. They're using the same thing here, saying that underneath these schools, underneath these houses, underneath these hospitals, Hamas is building the intelligence. Even if that was true, that was true, guys, even if they were building things, right? Do they have to bomb these people? Can't they just say, oh, well, that you're doing this, like let's get out of there, blah blah blah? No, it's an excuse. They know what they're doing.
In Lebanon, they were blaming Hezbollah. In Palestine, they blame Hamas. It's like, you know, I got that wrong the other day, a couple shows again. My friend reminded me and stuff like that. But still, once again, it's the same excuse, whether whoever it is. And these are movements out there that are really the people are really kind of going towards, because they're the only ones willing to stand up and fight against Israel. So one of the things that I think we need to see more of is boycott, divest, and sanction. Here it is. The Maldives, smallest Muslim country, has suspended all kinds of relations with Israel and shown its solidarity with Palestinian people. There it is, including a ban on Israeli products. So they're banning Israeli products. I think there needs to be more of that. Israel needs to feel, at least, if not, you know, the economic part of it, the economic side of it. And here's what I wanted to point out, because I've seen so many Zionists come out of the woodworks, right? This has been a revelation. Another revelation we had, right? We had Force the Vote reveal a lot of things. We had this Palestine reveal a lot of things. Lovely watching all the America First, and this kind of goes into the culture war section too. Far right back Israel, right? I thought it was America First. All these illegals taking our money. Look, they're getting free healthcare. Well, Israel's getting free healthcare on your dime. Israel's getting money on your dime. A country with a longer life expectancy and better lives because they take our money, while Zionist liberals stand right there with them. All these conservatives and that hate all these libtards, well, you guys are in agreement when it comes to Israel. It shows you who really is consistent, and it's not either of them. So don't fall for their culture war. And again, like Pasta's going to talk more about that, but I just wanted to point that out, because it's like, this is where you see really who's really consistent here. Like, are you anti-war? Are you just anti-war if it goes with my ideology or whatever? Like, it's like, no, dude. Like, this isn't how it works, right? Do you want to show something?
Real quick, fam. So while the Maldives are boycotting Israel. You have Germany here actually meeting with Bibi. And I'm going to show this real quick.
I just had a very productive meeting with Minister Maas from Germany. Expressed our support for the unwavering position of Germany in supporting our right of self-defense. And it comes from the heart, not only representing the government, but the people of Israel in our time of need. So thank you. I described during our meeting that while we're fighting on various fronts, the true backer of much of this aggression is Iran. Iran not only supports completely the Islamic Jihad in Gaza and gives them all the financing, they also give weapons to Hamas as well as to Hezbollah, and they provide the scaffolding on which these organizations really work. While we were engaged in these hostilities a few days ago, Iran sent an armed drone to Israel from Iraq or from Syria. Iranian forces launched a drone, armed drone, which our forces intercepted on the border between Israel and Jordan. And that, I think, says everything on the true patron of terror in the Middle East and in the world, Iran.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you've been a great friend, and it's said with gratitude from the people of Israel.
Where's the meme?
Thank you very much. You can count on me, and you can count
the
on
Nazi
us.
with the
Thank you very much. I think we can shake hands, even though
handshake.
It's a pleasure.
the COVID is under control. Thank you.
Who would have thought? Imagine being back in 1942 and saying, "Hey, Israel." The Jewish state of Israel is going to stand in line with Germany.
Well, Germany is standing in line with Israel.
Yeah, well, right, on both ends.
There was
against the
before
genocide
that,
of Palestinian.
When it comes to the elites, there was back in the day there was a Zionist Nazi coin way back in the day. So, but I mean, it's like anything's possible, I guess, at this point. So.
I wanted to read Mohammed Smiri's
Great
tweet.
name.
Okay. After ceasefire, don't stop your protests. Don't return to your homes. We want an end to the blockade.
Oh, yeah.
We want full treatment for cancer patients. We want to travel abroad. We want people from around the world to visit us. # Gaza. Because a lot of Americans want this, ceasefire, yay. We went out there, we did our thing, and now it's it. Moving on to the next thing. Yeah. No, fuck that. Like, that's not okay. This is what I want. A really great point Ashley made. I want to point this out, right? She said, this is Ashley Hudson. She said, weird how Palestinian workers, she's Palestinian, acted collectively to shut down the Israeli economy for all of one day, and suddenly Netanyahu is calling for a ceasefire. It's almost as if a general strike is IDK, the most effective thing oppressed classes can do to demand basic human rights, right? Because Netanyahu called the ceasefire after these Palestinians completely shut down the economy, right? Guys, we can learn from this, right? We can learn from this. She said, make no mistake, though, the fight is far from over. Every day is Nakba Day. We cannot give up now. Do you call yourself an ally? If so, then don't abandon Palestinians. Stay the course. A ceasefire does nothing to end the forced demolition of expulsion from Palestinian homes. Daily incremental genocide, and this is what Marwa and Eva Bartlett also talked about, medical apartheid, the 50+% unemployment rate, few hours of day of electricity, the 4% clean drinking water, etc. Systemic change is critical to liberation. And again, it's liberation too, above a lot of things, right? Because that's what it is. And again, even in Syria, whenever we interview Vanessa Bailey, we can only interview her at certain times because the electricity gets shut off. That's not, imagine living like that. How could we do this show? How could we do half the things? We don't even think about things like that. Oh, well, they don't have electricity for certain hours of their day. This is disgusting. I mean, this is nothing. And here it is, guys. This is pasta. Just I'll let you read this because it's
this week, just in, President Joe Biden addresses ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. In my conversation with Mr. President Netanyahu, I condemned him for the decision to bring the current hostilities to a close. Huh?
I commended him.
What did I say?
Where are your glasses, fam?
Did I say commended him?
No.
Oh, I commended him for his decision to bring the current hostilities to close within less than 11 days.
Folks, I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu Earlier today, I spoke with President al-Sisi of Egypt. Prime Minister Netanyahu informed me that Israel has agreed to a mutual unconditional ceasefire to begin in less than 2 hours. The Egyptians have now informed us that Hamas and the other groups in Gaza have also agreed. In my conversation with President Netanyahu, I commended him for the decision to bring the current hostilities to a close within less than 11 days. I also emphasized what I've said throughout this conflict. The United States fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against indiscriminate rocket attacks from Hamas and other Gaza-based terrorist groups that have taken the lives of innocent civilians in Israel. Folks, I've just...
All right. So he's pushing a ceasefire because of public outcry, but really he's saying Israel has the right to defend themselves. So you're saying they have a right to... Okay, who started the bombing? That's right. That was Israel. Israel started the bombing because Palestinians didn't want to get evicted from their homes they've been in. So Israel started the bombing. Then, of course, the resistance came back and retaliated and killed 10 people. I'm not saying that Israeli lives don't matter. 10 people, okay. But we're talking about over 230 Palestinians. We're talking about targeted weapons directly to civilians, knowing that civilians were going to die. And then the whole gaslighting. Biden is a piece of shit warmonger. He has always been. This is nothing new. This is who he is. We knew that.
This is why we voted out fascism.
This is why we were so mad that progressives were justifying Biden to us and making us look like we were the bad guys. We knew this was going to happen. Yeah. And we wish we were wrong, but we knew that was going to happen.
And just to reiterate, too, the ceasefire doesn't stop the blockade. It doesn't stop the bad drinking water. It doesn't stop the fact they have limited electricity. It doesn't stop the fact they can't travel anywhere. It doesn't stop the fact that nobody can come into their country and they can't make money off tourism or anything else. It doesn't stop the fact that they're still living in the worst conditions in the entire fucking world.
Over 50% unemployment.
Right? Over 50. It doesn't stop all that shit. It doesn't stop the fact that Israelis are going to still continue to evict Palestinians in certain areas in East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, wherever they're going to now.
Sheikh Jarrah, are they going to stop the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah? Because if that doesn't stop, you think Palestinians aren't going to stand by and let it happen?
I lose track where they're evicting them. They've been evicting Palestinians for years. It's not going to stop any of that shit.
The worst part is, fams, and Johnny, I'm just going to read a small little paragraph of this, all right?
From Mint Press?
From Mint Press. Great article. The American arms makers are making a killing, no pun intended, off of Israel's slaughter in Gaza. Major arms and aircraft manufacturers Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon are reaping massive profits from Israel's assault on Gaza and are expected to see their earnings boom with the $250 million arms deal the Biden administration is trying to push through, which they will likely push through, as we just went over. But I wanted to read this part here at the very end. Here it is. Here it is. Okay, I'll read a couple of these. So the Boeing makes the F-15 fighter jets and Lockheed Martin manufactures the F-16 and F-35 warplanes. These are not the only American corporations involved in the production of the Israel's military aircraft. General Electric produces the engines F-15 and F-16 jets. Raytheon Technology creates the missiles used to arm the F-15 and F-35 planes. According to the American Friends Service Committee's investigative database, Northrop Grumman manufactures approximately 35% of Lockheed Martin's F-35 aircraft, including its center fuselage, radar, avionics, electro-optics, navigation, communications and identification, subsystems, and mission systems and mission planning software. Okay, they've also partnered with the Israeli military industry to build a lightning targeting pod, a weapons laser navigation system used on F-16 warplanes. Military sales to Israel generate massive profits for these American corporations. Boeing secured $2.4 billion sale to Israel from the U.S. State Department last year. In February, the aerospace behemoth scored a whopping $9 billion deal with Israel's Ministry of Defense. In the last decade, Raytheon's contracts to Israel have totaled more than $4 billion. Lockheed Martin's most recent sale to Israel is estimated at more than $2 billion. In 2016, General Electric obtained part of a $300 $300 million sale to Israel. Northrop Grumman is less transparent about its international sales. Out of the Northrop Grumman's reported $36.8 billion in sales in 2020, 14% were international. They did not respond to any requests for comment from the press.
I'm trying to think for a second. Who worked at Raytheon that is now part? He was on the board of Raytheon. Who's the head guy over at the Pentagon now?
My mind. General
Lloyd Austin.
Oh,
there's no conflict of interest there.
None.
No. Why would he even, permit this stuff? And he was on the board of Raytheon.
Have we even heard him say anything besides Israel has the right to defend himself? No, of course not. Guys, this is systemic, right? This is what I mean. Like, you can't just... What is the solution? Or do you think we're going to have some sort of bill miraculously make it through Congress to stop this? No. Yeah. Guys, it's time. It's time. We need movements in the streets. This is an empire. You live in a goddamn empire where you have less and less and less rights every day. Okay? Meanwhile, these people have more rights and they're above you. It's an elite class, a predator class.
Intersectional imperialism.
We live in a fascist authoritarian state.
Such
increasingly.
The guy was sitting on the board of fucking Raytheon, and now he's the head of the Pentagon. He's the head guy.
Disgusting.
He's the one who's been tapped on the shoulder to give advice to Joe Biden on what country we should bomb and shouldn't bomb.
The more Palestinians we kill, the more money they make. The more people in the global south we kill, the more money they make. Johnny, how does it feel to be reading this after, I know when I knew many engineers at UCF in Florida, and I know you were pursued. You were looking into these jobs. This is what you were going to do.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I studied and graduated with a bachelor's in aerospace engineering. And, the big push for engineers in general is kind of interesting now that you see this list of all this fucking money, right?
Yeah.
The push for engineers is to get fucking people in there to make all this shit, right? So then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, holy shit, these are all the companies that I'm supposed to be applying to as an aerospace engineer, even as a mechanical engineer.
These
are the top companies. People were like,
at is good.
People are like, oh my god, Boeing, and then you get so much respect for getting a job at Boeing. Good job. Everyone's like, oh yeah, good fucking job.
Way to go.
And then you're making fucking bombs and warplanes and missiles, and no one can ever pay me enough to fucking look the other way while I fucking do that. Give my creativity and my
it's part of empire education, Johnny.
Yeah.
My
they're using your
geniusness.
Yeah.
No, your brain. But that's the whole thing, Johnny. I just watched a video on Operation Paperclip.
It's disgusting.
They don't care, dude. They use you. They think that you're in there for science. You're in there just to who's benefiting from all the science? Who's benefiting from all the education that you did at the end of the day? They want you to get in there. Johnny's really emotional because he realized that everything he studied for so long, everything he put his blood, sweat, and tears right now, how many years? I mean, I can just see Johnny thinking about what he was, all the homework and doing, and what it was going to be used for.
But it shouldn't be used for that. That's the thing. It should be used to build new technology to help people, not to fucking obliterate people. Like, that's the thing. Like, you think, oh, great, I'm going to go and become an innovator and like be a pioneer of science, and then they fucking make you a tool for the fucking military industrial complex. And I had roommates. My roommate worked for Northrop Grumman, and it was like, oh, women in engineering, we're breaking barriers. I'm like one of the only females in engineering. This is great. I'm like,
exactly.
And that's how they sell it to you.
Yeah.
That's how they do it, because this is like, and now that if you work in that industry, specifically though, as an engineer, it's one thing to work as like a low level employee. It's another thing to actually be engineering these weapons, because that's what you do. You literally do that. And you are held to high regard by your peers, by all of society. Yeah. Oh my God, an engineer working, wow. These are the jobs you want to get when you're graduating college. Johnny went on interviews with some of these people. This is what is deemed is just such high esteem in American society, and you wonder why the fuck Americans can't even point Palestine on a map. Why? Because they're not meant to. You're meant to see these people as not existing, as lesser than. We got to stop that. It has to end. This won't end with a bill. It won't end by electing more AOCs or more Rashida Tlaibs, because they will fold, just like you have seen every single fucking time. It's only going to end when you stand up and end it yourself. When we have a movement that is going to say, I don't want my tax dollars, I don't want people to think that I'm okay with my government killing fucking babies in Palestine, or my government sanctioning people all over the world that ends up causing civil war. What's happened to the global south, what's happening, all of this, our blood is in the hands of every single president up until now. Every single one of them has actually been complicit in the genocide of Palestinians, in the genocide of Yemen people, in the genocide of people all over global south who are enduring civil unrest. Everything that's happening in Colombia, everything that happened in Bolivia, everything that's happened in Venezuela, all of that. Yeah. It's tied to this empire. And it's time we stop pretending we are part of a great country. This is an empire. The people might be good. There's a lot of good American people that we can say we love and appreciate. There's a lot of them. It's not your fault. But you have to start speaking against it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. We think about the Convo Couch, how it started and whatnot and everything. And Jonny, man, I'm glad that you came out here on vacation and you never went back. Because we see how talented you are over here with this situation. I'm glad you weren't talented for them, because they have all the everything. They have all the ammunition in their pockets to get you, give you a lifestyle, give you money, give you a sense of goodwill that you're doing stuff for society, whatnot. But at the end of the day, you know, when you do this job over here and we start looking into government, we start looking down the rabbit holes, we see where the funding and the resources go. We understand who's pulling the strings at the end of the day, and it is all for evil. And I'm glad you're here with us and not with them, Jonny.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of it had to do with making that stand, because I don't know anybody else who's done a stand like that. Or, you know, I don't know.
I don't either.
It needs to be a movement.
Yeah.
Wake up. There needs to be a movement in the universities and colleges to make all these people that are trying to be an engineer aware, hey, all the job prospects that you're doing, that you're going after, are actually going to go help make missiles and bombs and fighter jets and all that. Yeah. And you're gonna be okay with that, right? You're gonna see these videos of Palestinian kids with their legs fucking gone, and you're gonna be okay with that, right? That you're contributing to that, right?
Exactly.
You'll be okay with that, right?
They won't.
That's what we need to start. That's what we need to get going, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because we gotta educate people. We gotta let people know.
Yeah.
So then.
I just saw that moment that I think that in your face that you just kind of recognized all those years you spent and all that hard work you spent in college and what they were kind of prepping you to do. You know, I mean, can you imagine what you were thinking the whole time you were studying that stuff?
Yeah.
You know, we talked to Rachel Brunke. We talk about these machineries, like this weaponry, these F-15s, these F-16s, which are used by the Israeli government, by the military, excuse me. They are some of the best, you know, engineering pieces of equipment out there, right? They're just amazingly engineered. But what are they engineered for? They're engineered for war. We need to find a way to engineer peace. And
there are so many things you could be putting good engineers to use, and engineering new types of energies, new types of way to like stop, you know, the just wasteful energy use with oil and nuclear power. New energies. Think of the things, that possibilities that the human mind could accomplish if our focus wasn't on destruction.
Yeah. Well, if we had a different mindset and we didn't have what was going on in this world, you can think about all the inventions that were made and how good they would be used.
I mean, let alone look at the train systems in other countries. Look at something as basic as
China. You can get around that whole country.
How fast? How better airplanes, faster airplanes, like energy, you know, reduce, like just healthier for the environment. All these things, but no, our number one focus is war. Is all of that, and we're training the young generations, the new generations of people to have that mindset as well.
Yeah.